Hi, I'm Carol from SanFrancisco Stitch Co. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to show you a technique to take 5x7 embroidery stitch outs and put a beautiful finished edge on them in no time. It's a much quicker technique than binding, and as you'll see, you can make it any shape that you want. Here's a couple of samples I have. First of all, it's a quick technique just to get a rectangle, so I don't want you to forget about that. But I've also have an oval sample here. I have a printout for you down below. You can download these shapes. There's a template for the oval. We have a beautiful serpentine curve called an OG. This one I named Princess, so if you can't decide if you want an oval or a rectangle, it's kind of both. The serpentine is always a really easy shape to stitch. We have a scallop, which is a little harder, but again, none of these take very much time at all. This is a 5x7 stitch out that I have of my autumn ABC piece, and I would have loved to throw a binding on it. I just don't have time. Thanksgiving's around the corner, so I'm gonna quickly finish this up in just 15 minutes today. My templates are designed for your 5x7 stitch outs. As an embroiderer, I'm sure you have a pile of ones that maybe for some reason you didn't like a color, or you may have had a little slip up while you were stitching, and it ended up in a pile in the corner, and it's just too good to throw out. Well, you can make a beautiful gift for someone out of that, and they will never notice what the problem that you saw in it was. So this is what we'll need: a 5x7 stitch out, a cute backing fabric. I have this fabric in my stash just from Joann Fabric a couple of years ago. We'll need a piece of batting, and then I have selected the AG pattern, and I've cut that out. I didn't trim my backing to any exact size. I can just see that it leaves plenty of room around my pattern. And the first thing I'm going to do is just cut it in half. Again, you know, measuring is only so much fun, okay? One part of the thing about growing as a sewer is realizing like when measuring is important and when it is not. And it's not important for this. I'm just going to cut that in half. Then I'm going to put the two pieces right sides together and just go right over to my sewing machine and join them again. I have my two pieces right side together, and just using the 1/2 inch mark on my plate, I'm going to sew 1/3 across. Now I'm going to backstitch to hold that. And now I'm going to move my stitch length up to the biggest it can be, like a great big basting stitch, and go across the next third. Go back to a regular stitch length. Backstitch. And then just complete the seam. So again, there's no measuring here. I just did 1/3 regular stitching, 1/3 based, and 1/3 back to regular stitching. Next, I'm going to head over to my ironing board and just press that seam open. Now it's time to draw our shape on the front of our embroidery. So again, I did make these templates for 5x7 embroideries, and if you see this darker shape here, that's a 5x7. I'm going to take it over to the window and flip it around. I'm going to be able to see through at the window and where the design is, and then I'll trace the outline around it. You could see I left the stabilizer in on this. That's totally personal choice. I usually prefer a stiffer piece. If you want a softer piece, just tear it out to the edge of your design. So that was a little bit of a reach at my window there, so I'm just gonna like put it down again here and just kind of neaten up my lines that didn't come out the best as I was reaching up to the window. All right, everything looks pretty good. And now I can take it off and I can just visually see that my piece is centered in that area exactly where I want it to be. Now it's already time to make our quilt sandwich. This is how we layer our quilt sandwich. First, we're going to put our batting down. Then we get our backing face up. I'm going to lay it down, and then I want my seam line to be centered in the middle of the piece. So I'm going to align it with just one of the lines on my board here, right here, and right here. Now this piece is going to go face down, and just to help it align with the seam on the back, I'm just going to draw a couple of lines here to find the center of this. So this is 9 inches wide, so I'm going to just make a little tick mark at 4.5, and again on the other side, and I'm just going to draw a little centering line right here. And then I could see my backing line is there, so I can just lay this down right here, and I'll know that the seam line is going to be centered and straight on the back. Okay, and then if you just want to check that your piece is on the backing fabric, because it's hard to see the backing fabric now, you can just kind of do this. And you might see that your piece is a little too close to the top, so you can adjust it, but mine looks really good. Now I could pin this, but I'm just going to slide it right over to my machine without letting anything move. I just slid the whole piece over. I can feel that nothing moved, and now I'm going to just again sew around the line. It's as easy as stitch on the dotted line. I'm going to take a little back stitch to begin with, and then just slowly go around my whole piece. So I have curves and straight lines here, and the trick to just getting a nice curve is to be constantly moving the piece as you go around. Now we're going to put our needle down in the corner. I always backstitch a little bit at the corners just because we're going to turn this inside out and I don't want to poke through. Little backstitch in the corner. Now back at the end, and I'm going to back stitch to finish. So this is a quick process, but if there's any one point where you want to take your time, it's just to really stay on the line, get nice smooth curves and sharp corners. Now it's time to trim. I usually use my rotary cutter and ruler for straight lines. So I'm going to do the corners first. I'm leaving 1/4 of an inch seam. Then I'm I'm going to go back with scissors and cut the curves. Now, at the corners, I take a cut like this, being very careful not to cut into my stitching, but just really shaving the corner down to a little angle there. And I have 8 corners on this piece to do. If you do accidentally clip your corner, what you can do is just go back to the sewing machine and go over, make a little new corner a little bit further in, or you can just, if you're very careful when you're turning it, not to turn it into an actual hole, you can top stitch around the edge later to kind of hold it. So there's no mistakes in sewing, there's only solutions. Then at my deepest curves, some people notch. I like to just take a little swoop because I think if you notch, it gives you a crimp when you turn it. So I'm just going to take one little swoop here. The curve is really gentle here, and so we're going to be much better off just leaving that alone. Now it's the fun part. We're going to turn our piece. So we're going to turn it to the backing side and just make a little hole, of course being careful not to cut into any of our fabric. Now I can peek in here and see the seam that I made when I sewed my backing together, and we basted that so you can see as I pull it, it's just ready to pretty much come apart easily. So all I really have to do is loosen one stitch and it's gonna open right up. And you want enough open to kind of fit your hand in there. All right, now we're just gonna turn it inside out. Some people call this the birth method. All right, now as best as I can with my hands, I'm going to start shaping the corners and the beautiful curves. I really like to use my hands on this, but I do have some fancy tools. Can take a look at. There's a tool that's actually made for this. I think it's called a turning tool, and you can just kind of stick this in through your opening and just very gently poke. Now let's just talk about corners here. This is not a piece of wood, and it's not gonna, you're not gonna get a 90-degree angle here. So don't keep poking and poking until it's like a point. This is just a very gentle little curve here, and it looks nice. And if I keep poking and poking at that to make it sharp, it's gonna look terrible. So go easy on your points. All right, and I'm just gonna work my way around here. Really, I do like this tool, but your hands can do the job if you don't have anything special. And there's also other things that aren't like special tools. Is you can really use like a pair of blunt scissors. Like these aren't pointy, and that'll go in nicely to poke out your corners. Certainly don't use pointy scissors because you're going to make a hole. right, so that's actually looking pretty good. And the next step, you're just gonna keep fine-tuning your shape. And the next thing I do is kind of roll it and start trying to get it really sharply creased now, just between my fingers. And I also have this cute little water sprayer bottle that I got in a mushroom growing kit. And it does help to wet it a little bit. You can get a nice sharp finger press. I try to get my front fabric just so that it's slightly coming around to the back. And I'm just gonna keep rolling and kind of pinching and turning until my shape looks nice and smooth. Okay, if there's little places, I might see that I could get this corner out a little bit more, so I will go back in with my tool or my scissors again. Little spray. Just be patient and enjoy the process and let it happen. That I am there, and I'll just flip it around. I think that looks pretty good, and we're now going to give it a final press from the back and from the front. Start pressing from the back. A nice look is just to have your front fabric very slightly showing on the back. And we're just going to do that all the way around. Press overall. Turn it over. Give it a final press. Okay, you can really see what you have now, and this really looks pretty good. I kind of got like just a little point there, so depending on how fussy you want to be, you can go back and continue to work it a little bit. See if I can get it to be a little bit of a smoother curve. Okay, now we can either just take a little stitch to close this up, or you can put a piece of fusible web, tuck it in there and just iron it shut, or sometimes I've just left it open. You can see that using this method, that edge just meets perfectly. So this is a good finish, but you know, I always like to plus things up a little bit. And one thing that looks nice and also strengthens it is if you just run a little top stitch around the edge. You have to be really neat at this for it to look good. I'm gonna line the piece up with the very edge of my foot, and then I'm gonna move my needle over as far as it could go without hitting the foot. Take a little back stitch to begin. Okay, and then I am going to go around this super slow and make sure that that edge is lining up with my piece all the way around. Because if you get even a little bit of variation in it, I just think it makes it look bad. And as we get back to the beginning there, we're just going to take another little back stitch. So one of the other things I really did right here is I used a thread color that matches the fabric exactly. So if I did go off a little, it's not going to be as apparent. Okay, I'm going to trim my threads, and I think we have a finish in time for Thanksgiving. So here's my finished piece. This took me probably between 10 and 15 minutes as opposed to a binding, which might have taken a half hour or more. You should always be on the lookout for cute stuff. I got this little package of bows in the dollar store. I always look for the on sale ribbon at Michael's. I love this big one. It's a little too big for this piece, but I might experiment with just folding it in half a little bit. And then I also have like buttons that I sort by color in tins, and I found a little pumpkin and a sunflower. So definitely look for ways to embellish. So I want to thank you again for joining me today. Subscribe and like. Your support means a lot to a small business person like myself. Thanks for joining me.